Disclaimer: Lore Olympus is a retelling slash reimagining of the Greek story of Hades and Persephone. Therefore, their character chart placement is dependent on their actions in the webtoon and not on their history. Thank you. Death isn't necessarily sad. In fact, death itself can be different for a lot of people. But typically, death inspires sadness. So it may be obvious that the god of the dead, the lord of the underworld, the person who controls the souls of the dead, is very, very sad. Let's not waste any time, because he appears a lot, and there's a ton to cover. Let's discuss Hades, one of the richest and one of the saddest gods. Now, like I've said before, Hades appears a lot. Out of 111 episodes, I'm willing to wager that he appears or is mentioned in about 90% of them. So like John from Unordinary, there's a lot to cover, so forgive me if I miss something. Hades is the very first god to appear, and he appears very sad, which will be a theme. It really doesn't help that his girlfriend, lover, partner, it really doesn't help that Meneth is talking Hades down throughout this entire beginning portion. I've already talked about Meneth's portion, but throughout Meneth's entire, let's say, put down, notice Hades' eyes. Notice the red glint in his eyes. Throughout this entire first episode, Hades' eyes get red when he's mad or depressed. Which brings us to Persephone. Now, Hades has been alive for 2,000-ish years. And being alive that long means you've probably been through a lot. And seemingly, Hades has gone through stuff. Hades' main theme is a feeling of worthlessness, believing that he is, well, trash. And that bleeds into the beginning of his conversation with Persephone, when he admits that the reason that Persephone was trapped in his car was because he thought she was prettier than Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. She starts laughing. And Hades states, "I know I may not be your type, but you don't have to laugh. Hades, my man, the type that you are is attractive, financially well off, and a dog person. Who wouldn't be attracted to you?" But Hades here believes that he doesn't deserve anything. Happiness, or a good future, or life. Which brings us to the weird red eye thing I mentioned before. Notice when Persephone asks about his dogs. That red eye glint fades away, and we see Hades smile like he's never smiled before. Hades hasn't been happy in a long time. Even when he's saying goodbye to Persephone, he looks so happy. Even his last goodbye to Persephone, the one that he believes will probably be his last, he looks happy. And speaking of red eyes, he gets them again. When he's out for brunch with his brothers, Hera interrupts and shows a picture of Persephone and Apollo, and the red eye glint comes back. We also get the line, "I never said I was entitled to her. I'm well aware that I'm a fool. I didn't even want to talk about it in the first place. I'm gonna go. I think I've been humiliated enough for one sitting." It's interesting. Hades, the terrifying god of the dead, lord of the underworld, a literal king of a realm, is backing down because some people called him out. Hades might be in a position of power, but sometimes he can come off as soft and meek. Hades truly believes that he isn't worth anything. As a king, as a god, as a lord, heck, even as a person, he doesn't believe that he's anything. That is, until he starts talking to Persephone. Hades gives good advice, even offering him insight on, well, sadness. "When I first saw you at the party, you looked sad. When I carried you into the home, you felt sad. And you sound sad right now." That's someone who's speaking from experience. He knows what it's like to be sad, to be lonely, to feel broken. Hades, at the beginning of the story, is very much that. Sad, lonely, and broken. Being stood up by Meneth, being humiliated by his brother's wife, and even having a young goddess locked in his car. And when he's confronted with that fact, he starts to relive some of his trauma. Eventually, he starts to stammer. Look, if you wanted to punish me, I would have been fine with that. Persephone didn't do anything besides being there. She got upset, you know? Persephone could have gotten really sick, eventually being called Adonais. While it seems like a random moment, it's linked to Hades' trauma. Anytime he's confronted with something he's uncomfortable with or a link to the past, he stammers. Why, you might ask, is a great question, viewer. Thank you for asking it. To those who know and don't, Hades doesn't really have the best childhood. Hades is one of the 6 tyrants, which means he's one of the first generations of gods. Kronos was Hades' father, and Kronos heard a prophecy that his children would be his downfall. So in an act of frustration, he decides to eat his children. We see Hades wake up in a cold sweat, saying, I thought I was past this. He can't hurt you. He's in Tartarus now. Then we get even more of Hades' past. Ages ago, we see Hades bandaged, bloody, and struggling. He was alone for 13 years without speaking to a single soul. And we see him struggle to even talk. We see that his stammering started here. Maybe in fear of going back to that. Maybe as a fear of being alone again. A fear of being hurt, in pain, broken, forgotten. We see Hades try and get better. Seeing a therapist, healing bonds, even trying to fix his relationship with Minith. Which brings us back to her. Minith and Hades' relationship, if I can steal a line from Eros, they are the ultimate on-again, off-again dumpster fire. And if you want to see this in full blast, I just did a Minith video. Check the iCard. But to brush up on most of their scene relationship, I already mentioned that Minith stands up Hades at the beginning, then gets weirdly jealous, then guilt trips him into making them an official relationship, then makes Persephone weirdly jealous, and then stands him up again. Which brings us to another disclaimer. I feel like I'm making a lot of these nowadays. This portion of the video focuses on themes of domestic abuse, which may be upsetting for some viewers. After Hades is stood up, Minith is confronted, due to her dress and her treatment of Hades. We see that Hades is aware of how mad she is. Oh no, she's really mad. And even the child version of himself appears, saying, I don't want to be alone with her when she's like this. And when Hades defends himself, Minith smacks him and continues to verbally abuse him, saying how lucky he is to even consider him. And we see something I've mentioned before come back. We see Hades say, I know, I'm sorry. Hades' stammer comes back. His stammer only comes out in moments of discomfort or even things being linked to his past, which comes up in this very conversation. Minith then compares him to his father. You know, the god that ate him and most likely created a deep fear and loneliness that sparked the stammer in the first place. What's telling is his reaction after this. When we see in the next chapter that Hades blacks out, and Nyx explains that, I believe that you're having a traumatic break. Apparently, complete darkness is preferable to facing your feelings. Hades breaks down after his conversation with Minith. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm terrible with confrontation, and being verbally and mentally abused isn't helping Hades stand up in fights. But it doesn't even take reading in between the lines to see why Hades blacked out. Because facing complete darkness is better than facing how he feels. And it's understandable for him. He's probably spent a long time inside his dad. Such a weird statement to make. And we've known he spent 13 years alone, broken and afraid. It's understandable that Hades isn't the most stable god. But we do see him get better. Sticking with his family, getting another dog, even creating boundaries with the goddess he's interested in. Hades goes on a better path, becoming more forgiving and more charitable, even putting someone's eye back in after he took it using weird loopholes and rules. Which brings us back to Hades and Minith, round 2. After Minith gets suspended from work and goes on a downward spiral, eventually looking like a literal river, Hades goes over and ends their relationship. And when Meneth protests, Hades goes on, saying, "Meneth, we've tried again so many times. Does being with me make you happy? Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't seem that way. I know you're working through some stuff at the moment, but I'm not the right being to help you with that. You need to take responsibility for yourself. You said it yourself. I thought we were meant to be messed up together. I don't want that. I want to feel loved and safe every day. Not sometimes. All the time." Hades here isn't just breaking up with Meneth. He isn't just moving on. He isn't just tying up loose ends. He's encouraging her. He's encouraging Meneth to get better, to move on, to do something better with her life. Hades understands his feelings here. Remember, a couple days ago, he would rather face complete darkness than his own feelings. Now he's encouraging someone who has verbally abused him, telling her to get better, to find someone who can help her get better. And while it's not verbal abuse, Meneth does talk him down, telling him it's not going to work, that he'd be back because they're the same. But this time, Hades doesn't black out. He doesn't subside or back down, he confronts it. I don't know what will happen with Persephone. Maybe it will happen. Maybe it won't. Maybe I'll meet someone new. Maybe I might simply be alone. What I do know is that we're done. Hades, as the god of the dead and lord of the underworld, has done a lot. He's taken out someone's eye, but he also respects women enough to date one person at a time, which feels like a really low bar to set, but trust me, it's actually not. And even follows rules set by Persephone. Hades, I believe, is going into lawful neutral. Someone who follows rules even when he doesn't want to. He's constantly telling Persephone that just because he's king, it doesn't mean he can do whatever he wants. There's a lot more to Hades that I failed to cover here, but hey, I might make another episode on him, like John. He's gotten a lot of attention nowadays. But, anyways, next week we will be wrapping up the Lore Olympus character chart series with Persephone. But, like always, thank you for watching.